So, you know, I gotta hold myself accountable here. I often say, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And I gotta remain consistent. It's all about consistency. See, in essence, that's really the problem in this country. There's no consistency. So I can't accuse you and say that you're evil or wrong for being inconsistent if I'm not going to be consistent myself. Now, consistency. You know, I was watching briefly part of what happened with Darrell Brooks. Are you all familiar with this case? Basically, this individual got into a vehicle, impaired. More than likely impaired. We don't know for sure. And it was during the holiday season, like right around this time, a year ago. And it was in Waukesha, Wisconsin. Got into a vehicle. It was a Christmas parade. And he drove at full speed into the crowd. I think 6 people were tragically murdered. Scores of people injured. Now, Darrell Brooks, he tried to flee the scene after he did this. He didn't want to take any accountability for his actions. Now, here's where it gets a little interesting. Darrell Brooks said that he's a Christian and that he believes he's been forgiven for what he did on that day. Look, this is partially why I don't do religion, because it's sort of kind of a excuse card that you can play. You know, you've heard it a million times, or maybe some of you haven't. For those of you who are new to the planet, and there's a bunch of you, you'll start hearing something about this character, Christ, who supposedly died for everyone's sins. And everyone who does something that's really deeply problematic uses this card. They're like, well, you know, I'm forgiven because I believe in Christ. And Christ sort of kind of absolved me of all of this bullshit. If you're new, you'll start hearing this. If you've been around this planet for a while, you hear this shit. Anyway, Darrell Brooks, it was very narcissistic, the commentary, his statement, everything. It was about, oh, well, you know, mental health, and this was what I had to do growing up. My childhood was rough. He talked about opening a box of cereal and bugs coming out of the box of cereal. Look, I'm not going to besmirch or belittle his lived experience. Not at all. But that too doesn't bring into account responsibility and accountability. He chose to get into the vehicle that night after an argument with his girlfriend. And instead of trying to de-escalate the situation, he chose to cause harm to people who weren't even affiliated or part of his situation. Now, with that being said, he deserves the full and maximum punishment that you can give an individual. But there's a reason why there's more to this story. You know, I was looking over the comments for the Darrell Brooks trial. I was looking over the comments. And it didn't come to me initially. I had to stop and think about it. I was like, what am I seeing? What am I reading? What am I processing here? And then it hit me like a ton of bricks. The hypocrisy. You know, that I think is one of the biggest problems. Hypocrisy in this nation. Oh, it's deep and it's thick. You can get the sharpest knife on the planet and it wouldn't do a dent of damage to American hypocrisy. Let me elaborate. Everybody was saying in the comment section that Darrell Brooks is a monster. I don't dispute this. Darrell Brooks is definitely a monster. What he did was very sick, depraved, cruel. But these same individuals who were judging, condemning Darrell Brooks for what he did. You have to understand this. This is really, really important. You have to understand this. These same individuals were also just a year prior justifying it. Yes, you heard me right. A year prior, in 2020, being a serial killer was something that people lauded and praised about. And then in 2021, it became something that was, well, evil, demonic. Now, on behalf of the only person who remained consistent, myself and a handful of other people, I've got to comment on this, America, because this is your problem. There's no consistency. I'm the only one being consistent here. So you're going to have to listen because it's important. In 2020, this is how the universe works also. Let me point this out, children, because your parents are liars. But this is how the universe works. The universe, it works like this. It exposes hypocrisy. In 2020, there was an individual by the name of Kyle Rittenhouse. I call him Rittenhouse because the house is rotten. So we have to call the thing what it is. Now, Kyle Rittenhouse, aka Rittenhouse, traveled up to Kenosha, Wisconsin. And we already exposed that that was a military operation. Yes, if you're now hearing this for the first time, that was a United States military operation. I don't care that they get mad or upset. I really don't. Anyway, he travels to Kenosha with an AR-15. And he alone, on that night, in the summer of 2020, murdered 2 people. Now, the same people who are against Darrell Brooks, saying that he's a serial killer, he's a monster, defended Kyle Rittenhouse a year ago. It's not different people, it's the same people. Now, if you have a problem with one serial killer, how do you not have a problem with the other? And not only, get this, please do understand this, not only did they not have a problem with what Rittenhouse did, Toilet Paper USA, also known as Turning Point USA, I think Charlie Kirk's organization, where he gets money from rich white men who call themselves Christian. Anyway, Turning Points USA invited Kyle Rittenhouse to be a speaker. I think it was either this year or last year. And as he was walking onto the stage, they had WWE music going. There were pyrotechnics. fireworks in the building. He got a hero standing ovation. And did he write a book? Did he solve cancer? No. He's a serial killer, just like Darrell Brooks is. But he got a standing ovation. Now, there was only one conservative, and I gotta give her a little credit, who said, I really don't think we should be treating this guy, who's a serial killer, like he's Bon Jovi. Tommy Lahren. She said that. But everyone else, they were cheering on a serial killer. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. And now these same people are saying in the comment section about Darrell Brooks, he's the worst individual. He's a monster. Look, I did not want to leave any comments in the comment section. Only because the victims of what Darrell Brooks did are still grieving. But I wanted to point this out and say this is really problematic. And this is why we still have all of these horrible things happening. Because young people can see the hypocrisy. Look, if I can see the hypocrisy, everyone can. You have to twist yourself in all types of mental gymnastics. Like one of those anti-soft pretzels. In order to justify one serial killer and demonize another. Now, I know they said Rittenhouse was self-defense. And you can go back and look at all the videos I've done about that. But that's bullshit. There was no self-defense. Self-defense is when someone breaks into your business or your home or attacks you first. And then you have the right to defend yourself. He got in a car, his story, not mine. He got in a car with strangers who he did not know off the internet. He took a weapon that he was not legally allowed to own or operate or even use. Traveled to a friend's house to go and collect the weapon. He's the only individual that night who murdered 2 people. And then he did the same thing Darrell Brooks did. You know, a lot of commentary was about Darrell Brooks being a narcissist. And I said, yeah, he fits the bill. But so too did Kyle Rittenhouse. He didn't take any accountability. After he murdered those 2 people, what did Rittenhouse do? Did he turn himself into the local police there? There were plenty of police officers there. No. He hopped back into the vehicle. And they drove him back home to Illinois. You know, the same thing people are complaining about Darrell Brooks wanting to hop into an Uber vehicle after he ran down 6 people. It's what Rittenhouse did after he shot 2 people. So if I'm a youth and I don't know any of this shit, I'm not political, I don't know any of this shit, and I just plop here and I see the hypocrisy, what do you think that does to someone mentally? See, America, you create a lot of mental health issues in people. You do. By not being consistent. By being very tribal. You know, the only reason Rittenhouse got off and Darrell Brooks didn't get off is because of race. People will say, oh no, it has nothing to do with race. Yes, it does. Did conservatives defend Darrell Brooks? No, in fact, they lied. They said it was premeditated, it was because of some political reason. Come to find out, none of that was the case. This individual has serious psychological mental health issues. Serious. And people are like, well, why was this individual out on the street in the first place? Maybe you should go and ask conservative lawmakers that question. You know, why are so many people who struggle with mental illness not able to get the help that they need? It couldn't have anything to do with Ronald Reagan in the 1980s closing up all the mental health facilities. No, it couldn't possibly have anything to do with tax cut after tax cut for high society members and cuts in mental health treatment. No, it couldn't have anything to do with those things. Not at all. Why is something that was funny in 2020 not funny in 2022? This is not a trick question. I know, none of you have the answer. So let me explain. There was a dear friend of ours, one of our own, Summer Taylor. And tragically, she lost her life in defense of Black Lives Matter in the summer of 2020, as a lot of people did. Now, Summer Taylor was hit by a vehicle going at high speed by another individual who was impaired, I believe intoxicated, drunk. And she tragically lost her life. Now, here's where the consistency part comes in. Conservatives, and I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them, they shared the video of Summer Taylor being hit by the vehicle. All online, they posted it as her family was still grieving. And they made jokes about it. Even here, we had a Washington sheriff. I believe he was a relative of the governor, Governor Inslee. He posted a meme about it. And he was laughing. Now, here's how the universe works. Something that conservatives found funny because it was someone they politically disagreed with being harmed in the society. Something they found funny in 2020. When it happened in 2021 at Waukesha, then Darrell Brooks became the devil. Rittenhouse is a hero. Darrell Brooks is the devil. Both of them are serial killers. So I'm scratching my head going, wait a minute. Didn't they both kill people? Multiple people? That's what I thought. And people were like, well, Darrell Brooks is a child killer. This is true. This is true. Children did lose their life. But come on now, Americans. Be honest with yourself. And see, this is where we really have to dig deep and be honest, Americans. Because our woes are not going to go away until we're completely honest. Americans, you don't give a fuck about child killers. Let me repeat that. Americans, you do not give a fuck about child killers. And I'm not just going to talk about women who have abortions. I'll leave that for altruistic conservative men to do. You don't give a fuck about the children that are here. Darrell Brooks is a monster. But what about the cop that shot Tamir Rice, a 10-year-old, within 2 seconds of pulling up in the park? As the dispatcher told him, hey, it's probably a toy gun. He didn't didn't get out and ask any questions. He just opened the door and bam! Unloaded on a 10-year-old. Murdering a kid. Is he in prison? Is he getting 1,000 years? No. He's still applying for different police jobs, so I heard. There's no outrage by white America about this cop who murdered a 10-year-old kid, Tamir Rice. Here, let me turn it up a little bit more. Americans, you need to hear this because you're full of bullshit. And see, it's been a long time since anyone came along and told the truth. I know. It's shocking to the senses. Let me turn it up a notch. Does anybody remember George Zimmerman? Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman. Now, Trayvon Martin has a bag of Skittles, right? And this deranged, angry individual by the name of George Zimmerman is told repeatedly, do not escalate the situation. Do not approach. Law enforcement is on its way. And yet he goes looking for Trayvon Martin with a gun. And he murders Trayvon Martin. And what do conservatives do? They justified it. They justified child murder. Look, one thing is for certain. Everything is on the record. So you can try to take down videos, remove comments, all of that bullshit. Look, I'm not even the big judge. And I know. So if you can't even fool me, forget trying to fool the big judge. Okay, back to the story. So Zimmerman murders Trayvon Martin, and conservatives go on a rampage trying to justify it. Well, Trayvon Martin was a troubled youth. You remember they said that. And then they posted the photos of Trayvon Martin holding guns on social media and smoking cannabis. All things that Kyle Rittenhouse had posted too. And conveniently, those things were removed by social media platforms. But just because you remove it doesn't mean it did not exist and still does exist. The internet is undefeated. I want youth to really understand this. Be careful. Because even if they remove shit, it's still in the system. And anybody can put it up at any time again. So Trayvon Martin was evil for holding guns. He was a troubled and disturbed youth. And we went all into his background. But with Rittenhouse, we couldn't talk about his background, could we? We couldn't talk about how he was a abuser. Yeah, we saw the video of him beating up that girl, right? Oh no, they removed that too. See, the fix was in from the beginning. America. This is America in a nutshell. Count Dracula, you're a monster. You suck blood from people. How dare you? Frankenstein over there pummeling people to death. Frankenstein is a hero. Me, I'm sitting here thinking, wait, Frankenstein is beating people to a pulp, and Dracula is sucking people's blood. Aren't they both monsters? Silence. We don't want to hear that. There's no consistency. And the youth can see that there's no consistency. And that's why they're acting out. when you elect leaders who don't abide by any norms or expectations, no laws, then expect that to trickle down into your general society. Expect the common person to be lawless. And don't, whatever you do, judge one person and not judge the other for the same thing. Because it's kind of confusing to someone who doesn't do the whole tribe thing. It's really confusing. I'm supposed to condemn Darrell Brooks. So let me go ahead and do that. Darrell Brooks, you are condemned. Whether you wear a fucking mask or not. Take some accountability and responsibility. But then I gotta condemn Rittenhouse too. I can't throw a hero's welcome for Rittenhouse and then be mad about Darrell Brooks. You just can't do that. See, I'm the only one being consistent. The rest of you are hypocrites. You're liars. You try to deceive and avoid. And you're tribal. I could have got on here and said, oh no, Darrell Brooks. I could have tried to justify it. But I didn't. So you have to ask yourself, why did conservatives try to justify Kyle Rittenhouse, George Zimmerman, the law enforcement officer who murdered Tamir Rice? Why did they justify child murder and say that it's okay? But then when Darrell Brooks does it, he's the demon. No consistency. None whatsoever. And you see, as long as there's no consistency, nobody is going to think our legal system is worth a hill of beans. The legal system is a joke. A complete and utter joke in this country. I liken what Darrell Brooks and Kyle Rittenhouse, I liken it to crack and powder cocaine, because that's a good apples to apple comparison. Powder cocaine. We're going to give you a slap on the wrist because we know that the people who do powder tend to be white people. But crack cocaine, oh, we're going to throw the book at you. Because the people who tend to do that are black people. Darrell Brooks is the devil. And Kyle Rittenhouse, he's an angel. Both of them are serial killers. Now, what type of mental gymnastics do you have to do to get your mind to accept such absurd nonsense? I tell you what type. You have to be a hypocritical American. And there are, sadly and tragically, millions of hypocritical Americans. That's a fact.